Chapter 23, Decal's Descent. Some of MC's staunchest proteges, Rico Smiley Garcia and Cesar Lobo Ramirez, were inconceivably turning on him and vying for his position as a regimental commander over the Salinas Street Regiment. This was a classic case of nefarious political maneuvering being perpetrated against a highly respectable carnale by two unproven simpletons who were indelibly motivated by money, power, influence, and greed. Smiley and Lobo had gotten a taste of the salad bowl's slang for Salinas, money-making potential, while MC was back in custody and now had no plans of relinquishing it. They even went as far as lodging untruthful accusations against MC for misappropriations of regimental money and no longer working under the patronage of the organization's best interests. Furthermore, Smiley Garcia became aware of the fact that Big Smiley had been banished from the O for his role in the D facility dilemmas and pushed harder to have MC hit for his own one-time support of Big Smiley and Brown Bob. The carnales up in the Bay would have normally waved off such frivolous accusations coming from two inexperienced young C's about a well-respected C like MC, or at the very least, they would have launched a full-scale investigation. However, Tex Terrible T. Hernandez was in control of the Salinas Regiment. Unfortunately, MC had one prominent force working against him. Smiley and Lobo began producing tens of thousands of dollars a month, and Tex was languishing in it. Therefore, MC became an inessential obstacle and no more than an encumbrance to his foul agenda. This was still in the beginning stages when I was in San Quentin with MC, but it would later come to a head when I finally got to Pelican Bay. Meanwhile, while we were still there with Little Man from Salinas, MC got a filter from Tex, directing him to put Little Man on freeze and to cease having him work with the street regiment in Salinas. Apparently, this stemmed from Little Man using his status to protect his brother Pablo in the Monterey County Jail, who was considered to be a high-level NR degenerate. It was also said that Little Man alerted Pablo after finding out that Pablo was about to be hit by the household, the active NF and NR members in the county jail. MC gave me the unpleasant honors of advising Little Man of his new status and the investigation he was under. Little Man was obviously concerned about it, but acted like he was clueless as to why Tex was taking these measures against him. Little Man paroled a few weeks later and was picked up in Salinas by one of his closest friends as he got back into town. The following day, on March 8, 1997, Little Man's body was found in an artichoke field on Espinosa Road near Castroville. His fingers had been duplicitously fixed to pose the number 13 in a feeble attempt to insinuate that his murder had been committed by Sureños. It came as somewhat of a complete surprise that Little Man was murdered that fast after he paroled, but MC told me he warned Little Man about becoming too involved with his brother Pablo. Apparently, Tex wanted this to serve as an example. While I was still waiting for the bus to take me back to Pelican Bay, another C from Salinas by the name of Robert Chico Rose also came through the AC for about 3 weeks before he got moved to East Block. Chico was another solid C that I would eventually become real close with. He was a well-rounded, articulate hardliner who was also another protege of MC's. Chico claimed himself as being aligned with MC and claimed he stood against what Smiley and Lobo were trying to do. But later on down the line, his true position would come into question after the Salinas Regiment became involved in another power struggle. After Chico got moved to East Block, MC and I began working with an NR member by the name of Tomas Chopo McIntosh from Watsonville. Chopo apparently expressed a desire to MC about getting pulled, becoming an NF member, so MC wanted to start schooling him. I didn't think Chopo was cut out to become a C, as he had a lot of shady character flaws, but this was MC's gig, and I was only assisting with the schooling. About a month before I left Pelican Bay, MC approached me on the yard minutes after we came out and handed me a letter. His exact words were, "Read this. Those fools are really trying to create problems." The letter was written by Rico Smiley Garcia, and it was addressed to Tex. I don't know how he was able to get his hands on it, but I didn't ask. I just read it. The letter claimed that MC was bilking money for himself and was no longer working toward the old's best interest. The one phrase Smiley used that caught my eye and clearly stood out was, "Out with the old, in with the new." That was a powerful statement and left no question about his true intentions. MC was usually real laid back and composed and rarely allowed anything to rattle his mien. But for the first time, I could see that he was a little unnerved. It was then that MC asked for my assistance and told me that he needed my help. He knew I was on my way back to the Bay and would have an opportunity to file a report on his behalf. Over the course of the next week, he recited a full breakdown verbatim there on the yard and covered all the pertinent issues involved. I really had no desire of getting myself involved with this, as there were just too many complex and sensitive issues surrounding the Salinas regiment. But he was my mentor, and I knew he was depending on me. I wasn't about to let him down either. Prior to leaving, I made sure I had a clear perspective of all the relevant facts so I could file a report on his behalf in the precise text that he had intended. I finally departed for Pelican Bay in December of 1996. The orientation block in C1 had been completely eliminated. This time, I was housed in C11. The pod I moved into was full of NR and NF members. There were only 2 Sureños and 2 Northern Blacks. The rest were all Northerners. NR member Anthony Baby Joker Solis from Salinas was celled up with NR member Rick Bandit Martinez from San Jose. NR member Anthony Baby Joker Solis from Salinas was celled up with NR member Rick Bandit Martinez from San Jose. NF member David Big Rock Ramirez from Salinas was celled up with NF member Anthony Chavo Jacobs from Hayward. NF member Armando Spider Flores from Lodi was celled up with NR member George Gato Soto from Salinas. And NF member Luis Lucho Montalvo from Hayward was celled up with NF member Arthur Bayaso Torres from Redwood City. Almost immediately after I got there, I began filing reports about the Salinas Regiment and all the issues MC wanted me to cover. It took me about a week of continuous writing before I finally completed the reports, and then it was out of my hands. Big Rock was the unit commander, the UC, so I passed everything on to him and advised him that MC wanted the reports to go directly to Cornelio Tristan from Woodland, and Cuete, Gerald Rubalcaba from Tulare County. I knew Big Rock was communicating with the generals because whenever he'd receive an NF mandate or an advisement, he would let all the C's in the pod read it. Cuete was the one drafting up these mandates and used the title Cinco Nueve when referring to the organization's leadership. He came up with the pseudonym Cinco Nueve because at the time, there were 5 high-ranking members together and all of them were in the same pod in 9 block. Within that same week, NR member Rick Bandit Martinez from San Jose locked it up during a trip to medical. This is how it's typically done in the Bay. If an individual has plans to PC up, go into protective custody, it's usually done during a medical or dental appointment, a visit, or some other type of out-of-the-unit movement, and they always wear their good shoes. They'll leave and never come back. You only find out when the unit officer comes walking in with plastic bags and the property cart to retrieve their personal property. Bandit apparently got spooked when I arrived in the pod and obviously assumed that all the reports I was filing might have pertained to him. He was in Quentin with me a few years prior to this and had been unjustly hit behind an issue where somebody apparently jumped the gun and didn't thoroughly investigate the facts. I personally looked into it myself and conducted a thorough investigation of my own. I eventually cleared him and had to convince him that it was okay to come back out to the yard. But he was obviously still worried about it and must have thought that his issues were being revisited. After he left, I moved in with the celly Baby Joker and was told to begin working with him as he was in the process of becoming a C. George Gato Soto from Salinas was also being groomed up to become a C by a celly Spider, so we shared and combined their schooling. I spent the next 22 months brushing up on my own schooling and going back over street affairs in preparation to go back out to San Francisco. Sheldon Skip Villanueva from San Jose and James Conejo Perez from Sacramento sent word to me, advising me that I'd now be working under Big Rock's authority on the streets, but was still expected to continue communicating with Conejo. Big Rock was now assigned as my new channel, and the O was putting him in charge of the San Francisco and Oakland street regiments. Basically, Big Rock was being given the Bay Area. Meanwhile, another constituent was about to become involved in MC's perplexity, and this individual would become responsible for expediting the frivolous push against him. Jimmy Siriowski, an older C, acting as Texas lieutenant, would be tasked with looking into the accusations against MC and then allowed to render an independent decision as to MC's fate. Siriowski, whom they called Wino, was out on the streets and overseeing the street regiment in Oakland. Wino conducted a superficial investigation by talking to Smiley and Lobo, who again claimed that MC misappropriated 9,006 pounds of methamphetamine. They also claimed that he was no longer working towards the O's best interest and called for his expulsion. Since MC was a Category 3 member, Tex had no authority to allow Wino to make this type of decision. This was a complete default in protocol at the highest level. Due to the fact that MC was a Category 3 holder, his murder required a vote by the inner council and could only be sanctioned under a majority vote. But the other members who held positions in the high command had no idea this situation was developing. In September 1998, Big Rock received an advisement from high command that was a filter to all NF members, informing us that MC, referred to as Tikal, his Nahuatl name, had been killed by the hands of the NF, and nobody was to discuss it, second guess it, or render an opinion about it. This advisement also said that an unsuccessful attempt had been made on Art Big Smiley Ramirez's life, and that the O was exposing him and Pablo Pantera Peña both for their roles in the deep facility power struggle. Furthermore, it stated the title of Nuestra Raza was being stripped due to this movement's continued insubordination to the ethics and decrees of the organization's leadership and direction. The sole purpose was to realign this movement back into conformity and to reassert control over some of these rogue NR members. It concluded by admonishing all Familianos to take this as a warning and as an example for anyone who creates division, discord, or disharmony within the organization. Furthermore, that nobody within the organization, including those holding positions at the highest post, are exempt or are above consequences of expulsion. I was upset and discouraged when I heard about this. At the time, I didn't know all the details about Wino's involvement or how MC's murder was sanctioned. But one thing I undeniably knew, MC fell victim to nefarious political maneuvering, and Tex was at the center of it. This, in itself, sent a discouraging message to other C's and NR members alike who knew MC, and the message was clear. If they could whack a loyal, dedicated C like Mikeo, where does that leave someone like me? The murder of MC caused a backlash in Salinas, and a lot of Norteños, NR members, and even C's walked away because of it. Sometime around November 1998, we were all moved to C2 by the prison administration. Only the NF members in C11 were moved, which led me to believe that it stemmed from information they received from one of the individuals who had previously locked it up. They obviously wanted all their eggs in one basket. Recently pulled NF member George Gato Soto from Salinas and NR member Richard Spider Goldie from Stockton had both just locked it up from our pod, so it was safe to assume that they had something to do with these moves. NF member Daniel Stork Perez from Salinas, NF member Sylvester Silver Gomez from Tulare County, NF member Renee Chispa Ortiz from Salinas, NF member Santos Bad Boy Bernius from Corcoran, NF member Dimas Diablo De Leon from Tracy, and NF member Eugene Smiley Curley from Oakland were all in C2 when we got there. Stork was the UC unit commander, and almost immediately him and Big Rock started bumping heads. What it all came down to was Big Rock had become accustomed to holding a position of authority and was refusing to recognize Stork as the UC. Big Rock and I eventually celled up and started going over the final stages of the street business, i.e., his expectations, establishing codes for communication, establishing all the contact information for money deposits, and other directives pertaining to the regiment. He was also preparing me to be elevated to a Category 2, which was eventually approved by Corny. However, it was around this same time that Stork sent word over to me, directing me to rewrite everything I knew about MC and the regiment in Salinas. The request was actually coming from Corny. Stork was in a pod where he could communicate directly with Corny and Tex through the yard door. Corny and Tex were cellies in C3, and that was how the communication was filtered back and forth. Knowing that this would be relayed directly to Corny, I rewrote everything, taking my time to ensure that MC's message was compendious and nothing was left out. I didn't fabricate or embellish anything MC laid out for me. I made it absolutely clear that I had no interest or nothing to gain from being biased either way. My only objective was to pass on the information that I was given. Being that MC had already been murdered, I knew that this could have only been indicative of one thing. Corny was conducting an independent investigation into the possibility that MC was unjustly killed. I had only hoped that my reports authenticated some of the true facts, because in all actuality, I was the only voice that MC still had. This gave me a small measure of optimism, in hopes that those responsible would be held accountable. At least this was what I had hoped. Although never told at the time, I would later find out that this is exactly what happened, and that this was the sole purpose for Corny moving in with Tex. Tex was the one being investigated for his role in MC's murder, as he was the one who authorized Jimmy Wino Siriolski to make the call. Corny moved in with Tex while the investigation proceeded, as it was his intention to kill Tex if the orders ever came from Cuete upon discovering that MC's expulsion was unjustified. Needless to say, the orders never came. Even upon discovering how Tex deceived the organization by allowing his lieutenant to decide the fate of a Category 3 long-term member, Tex would later be stripped of his Category 3 status and demoted to a Category 1 as a formal consequence of this relegation. Further sanctions included the forbiddance of Tex holding a position within the organization ever again. Under NF law, Tex should have paid with his life or should have been expelled from the organization altogether. The actions taken against him were actually counterproductive, as it was indicative of one thing, that Maquillo's murder was unjustified and a member of high command had overstepped his boundaries and violated a sacred NF law. Although the leadership never outright admitted this was a blatant oversight and impropriety, the actions taken against Tex spoke for themselves. It clearly discredited the organization's infallibility on the contentious subject and proved that there were still a lot of unanswered questions. Later on, I would find out the details of how MC was killed and the circumstances surrounding his undignified murder. On August 10, 1998, MC paroled back to Salinas and spent the first couple of days with his family. He paroled with strict orders to stay away from Brown Bob and was now assigned to work under long-term NF member David D.C. Cervantes. After resituating himself, MC arranged for a regimental meeting to be held in the parking lot of the Los Padres apartments on Alisal Avenue. On August 15, 1998, 5 days after he was released, MC contacted an NR member by the name of Willie Shadow Stokes and asked him for a ride to the Los Padres apartments. On their way there, Shadow warned MC about not putting too much trust in Smiley or Lobo, as word on the streets was that they were up to no good. MC felt confident that everything would be ironed out, especially since he was told that he had the backing of DC and the OGB, organizational governing body, behind him. MC did in fact have the organization behind him, or at least he was supposed to. After a thorough and extensive investigation, MC was cleared and was authorized to resume his position as the RC for the Salinas Regiment. Filters were sent to Smiley and Lobo advising them of this, but later they would simply claim that they never received them. They basically manipulated the circumstances. Since they were aware that Wino had issued a green light prior to this, all they had to do was claim that they never received this follow-up filter, which would have remitted them any culpability for killing him. When they arrived at the apartments, MC shook hands with Shadow and exited the car. Shadow drove off, watching MC walk into the parking lot area of the first complex where Smiley and some of the other C's were waiting. MC's intentions were to get everybody on track and to simply expel all the infighting and detraction that had been squandering the regiment. But Smiley and Lobo had an anonymous agenda of their own. As MC approached the group of C's who were waiting for his arrival, Smiley walked up behind him and pumped 2 quick slugs in the back of his head with a small caliber handgun. MC was caught completely off guard and fell to the ground. Smiley and the others stood over him as he helplessly crawled on the pavement, moaning with a fatal head wound. As MC's life was literally draining away and he gasped to take his last couple of breaths, Smiley allegedly kicked him in the face 2 or 3 times, telling him, "Look at you now, who's gonna help you now?" After kicking him a few more times, the group dispersed, jumped in their vehicles, and drove off in different directions. These details incensed even some of those who supported his murder, as he didn't deserve to meet this type of undignified and ungraceful death. MC was treated like an animal after having devoted almost 30 years of his life to this organization. But as the Nuestra Familia has demonstrated time and time again, it has no qualms when it comes to eating one of its own, or expending even some of those who have given nothing but unconditional loyalty. Meanwhile, it became obvious they were preparing Bad Boy for some type of special assignment, based on the amount of communication that Stork was passing on to him from Corny. Bad Boy was getting ready to parole, so I knew it had something to do with the streets. A few months after I paroled, I find out exactly what it was.